Hi, everyone. Good evening. Carl Steinbeck here. I want to talk about the Karen Reed case again tonight. And what I want to talk about is the 911 call that Jen McCabe made early morning hours upon her driving with Carrie Roberts and Karen Reed to the 34 Fairview Road, the address of the Alberts, and that being a detective with the Boston Police Department there, Brian Albert, and that was where a party was after the attendance at a bar, the Waterfall Bar, in the up till around midnight the evening prior. So this 911 call is very revealing. It's so revealing, I think, that it shows so much of what I've been talking about in terms of constitutional due process and reasonable doubt. And this is right, really crystallizes and drives home the point that for reasonable doubt, all you need is one reasonable doubt. If you can only come up with one reasonable doubt as a juror, you must acquit. You must find the defendant not guilty. So that's how our justice system works. You may think somebody's guilty, but if the weight isn't there and you have a reasonable doubt and you're still wondering what really happened, well, that's a reasonable doubt if you don't really know what happened. And then just as we have in this case, the prosecution has no cogent, logical, consistent, straight answers for what happened to John O'Keefe that night. They're parading up witness after witness that has credibility full of holes, and they can't make any sense. And they're bobbing and weaving and trying to deflect, and they won't give you a straight answer. And other answers that they give that seem straight just belie anything about that we know about human life and experiences. So with that, the thing to also keep in mind is the defense doesn't need to come up with a theory. There's so much pressure. I think the defense, many times in cases, the defense lawyer thinks I have to come up with a theory of what exactly happened. Well, that's not what the law requires. And to be effective as a defense lawyer, you don't always have to have a theory of what did happen. You just have to, at a minimum, show how there's holes in the prosecution's case. And here there's tons of them. There's reasonable doubts every which way you look. You can't find credible witnesses brought forward by the prosecution on any of their main points. There was no true investigation. John O'Keefe's death was treated anything but serious and professional. And even this 911 call, there's so many things we could talk about what led up to this call being placed and why the Alberts didn't come out of the house and why Jen didn't alert them and bring them out of the house. But let's just go exactly to this 911 call here. And based on that, no, let's see, hold on a second. Trying to share this here 1 second. Got to adjust the screen size and all that. Sorry, this was ready to go. A lot of times it X's out when I'm doing this thing. But anyway, going to go ahead and play this, and I'm going to stop it. If you guys have any points to raise or questions to raise, I'll go ahead and address that as well. So let's listen to this. This is the 911 call made by Jen McCabe at 6:08 a.m. And just listen to this and pick up on the different cues and indicators that something's not right the way she's acting.
No, police is court line. What is your emergency?
Yes, I need someone to come to 34 Fairview Road in Canton, Mass. There's a man passed out in the snow.
You're in Canton? Hold on. I'm going to transfer over to Canton, please.
Okay, so right there's a man passed out in the snow. Passed out? It sounds like he's just drunk and passed out. She's not conveying the seriousness of it. And a man in the snow. And this is somebody that she said on direct examination in the first trial, a man that she loved. And she know he's a Boston police officer. And that's the most you can come up with is a man is passed out in the snow. and she knows he's been there supposedly for hours, right? And it looks like he's practically dead, if not already dead. And that's all she can say is a man's passed out in the snow. So right there, this is reasonable doubt in and of itself. When you take those data points, she knows him. She says she loves him. She should be mortified and just fully upset about this thing. Does it sound like she knows a guy and even gives a rip about him? Sounds like she's just doing like a good Samaritan thing. Like, oh yeah, I'm driving along. Found some person laying in the snow here. It looks like they just passed out and just fell over a couple minutes ago. But look, she doesn't even say anything like, hurry, get the ambulance here. Hurry, get somebody here right away. This is a Boston police officer. He might have been knocked out or beaten or something. She doesn't say anything about his condition being in life-threatening condition or that he possibly is dead. So right there, this doesn't make any sense. And this video should be played for the jury, and they should hear this. This should be played on her cross-examination, and she needs to be grilled over this.
You're connected to Nolan, okay?
Yeah, I don't know why I did that.
It's the towers. I'll try to stay on the line.
I think he's dead. You got to get here ASAP, okay?
I'm going to try and stay on the line. I'm going to try to do it again.
Okay, you got to get here ASAP. I don't know if that's mistranscribed where it says he's dead, but where's the panic in here? Why is she not sounding the alarm to get help there right away? An ambulance.
Okay. I know. Where are the blankets? I don't see blankets, Terry.
911.
Okay, why isn't she doing anything when she's on the phone running to get Brian Albert out of the house? He's a first responder. He knows how to do CPA. Why aren't they bringing him into the house? Why aren't they doing something to keep him warmer than just letting him lay out there in the frozen tundra?
Emergency.
Yes, I need someone to come immediately to 34 Fairview Road.
Someone. Again, another data point. I need someone. Who's someone? This is somebody you love and they're dying. You don't even say his name up till this point, and you don't alert him that this is a police officer. Man, they'd be sending every cop in town. They'd be calling up the guy across the street saying, hey, we got a cop down, and all hands on deck kind of thing.
Canton, Mass.
What's going on?
There's a guy unresponsive in the snow.
A guy unresponsive in the snow. Again, unresponsive. This is huge, folks. This is massive. There's something else going on. You don't have to make sense of it. You don't have to believe she's involved in it. You don't have to believe anything other than the fact that she's acting suspicious, and she may know who was behind this, right? So it's nothing to do with her being guilty of anything to do with John's mortal injuries, but it does have to do with reasonable doubt, and reasonable doubt is all over this thing. We're just hearing the first few seconds of this 911 call, and right there, the prosecution has massive gaping holes in it, and this person has something to hide. So if she's acting like she's got something to hide and somebody she loves, and she also doesn't mention the fact that this is right in front of Boston police officers Brian Albert's house, right? So she's downplaying everything, not trying to sound the alarm too much, and just soft selling this thing. So, and think about the way she like mocks Karen Reed in her testimony, that the way she describes Karen yelling, Jen, 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 like she's wanting her to shut up, like this is not a big deal kind of thing. So nothing about this Jen McCabe adds up, nothing at all. And that right there, for a juror, if you can't explain why she's acting so strange and bizarre, right there, that should give you a clue that you don't know the truth. The Commonwealth is not giving you the truth. And they're not giving you the truth, guess what? Not guilty.
In the snow at 34?
He passed out, yes. 34, the Albert resident, yes. I just pulled up and found him.
Okay, 34 Fairview?
34 Fairview, Canton, Mass, yes.
Why isn't she asserting anything again? Why isn't she saying this is the name of the guy? We got Boston police officer John O'Keefe. He lives in Canton, and he's at this house. My brother-in-law, Detective Brian Albert. She says none of that.
I don't know, that's not recorded. Where's your emergency?
I don't know.
Hello?
Yes, I'm sorry. Can you come to 34 Fairview Road in Canton?
34 Fairview?
Yes, there's a man unresponsive in the snow.
Okay.
Nope,
Is he,
he doesn't.
is he blue at all?
Okay, again,
Yeah, you've got to get here.
let's back that up. 10 seconds. All right, here we go.
34 Fairview?
Yes, there's a man unresponsive in the snow.
So now it's a man. So she has 3 times here in the first opening seconds of this 911 call to say it's a police officer. Hurry, hurry, he's dead or dying. Send an ambulance right away. No, what did she do? Sounds like it's a, some kind of deer hit on the side of the road. It's blocking traffic or something. That's all the urgency they need to show. Send somebody, not a crew of ambulances or anything. This is like not a big deal to her. So what got to her why she could not sound the alarm?
Okay. Is he, is he blue at all?
Yeah, you've got to get here. Okay.
Okay.
You guys, again, she's not saying an ambulance needs to get there, right? I mean, she did say that he's unresponsive, but she's not saying that the guy has serious wounds. It looks like he's dead for certain. It sounds like that's in the background noise. They're saying he's dead. Where do you hear her saying he's dead?
What's going on? Is he face down?
We just flipped him over.
Okay. And who's that in the background? Is that someone related?
Okay, that's his girlfriend. His name is Jen McCabe.
Okay, how old is he?
Okay, right there. She knows they're going to start asking more details.
Okay. And who's that in the background? Is that someone related?
Okay, that's his girlfriend. His name is Jen McCabe.
Okay, how old is he?
Look at right there. His name is John O'Keefe. He's just Joe Schmo citizen on that curbside there in the lawn. Nothing about a police officer. She mentions his name and doesn't mention that he's a police officer because that would send a quicker response. A quick response. Does she sound like she's upset? Very upset, crying? No, not at all.
John is 46 years old.
46. How long has he been outside?
And this is a great point here. Sandra Beatles fan is saying, and she's not even concerned that her sister and brother-in-law could be injured in the home. Yeah, why is that? She knows something is what a juror is going to think. Any juror sitting on this case is going to think she knows something. And what does she know? Why isn't she coming clean?
I don't know. I don't know. He got out of the car and
is he breathing?
A couple of hours.
Right there. Let's back that up.
46. How long has he been outside?
Get out of the car.
I don't know. I don't know. He got out of the car and
is he breathing?
A couple of hours.
Okay, wait a minute. He got out of the car. I don't know. She says, I don't know how long he's been outside there like that. Why would she say, I don't know?
6 years old.
46. How long has he been outside?
I don't know. I don't know. He got out of the car and
is he breathing?
A couple of hours.
Well, if he got out of the car, when was that? You have some idea? You have some idea of the hours? If you said he's been out there like that for probably 5 or 6 hours, they're going to maybe send somebody more urgently. But it's all soft selling. It's not a big crisis, right? So what is it with this? Why would Jen McCabe be underselling the critical nature and then saying he got out of the car? Okay, makes it sound like he got dropped off. And he got dropped off there. So how long has he been out in the cold? So was he in the house? Did he go in the garage? Did he go through the part between the garage and the house, the side door? And by not mentioning this being, again, her brother-in-law, Brian Albert's house, guess what this is doing? This is also downplaying it. She's not mentioning something, hey, there's a cop list here. We don't know if there's somebody got murdered in the house. We don't know if John O'Keefe got shot. There's nothing to sound the alarm.
hours. If you, Carrie, if you, I don't,
You're right. It's almost like
I don't know if he's breathing. There are two
You're almost like
women
a
trying to do his body heat, and they're hysterical.
Okay, can you just try to ask him? I know it's tough, but we already have the fire department going. I just got to know.
Okay, I don't know if he's car and
Is he
it could be,
breathing?
a couple of hours. If you, Carrie, if you, I don't,
Look at that. She's whispering, as somebody highlighted here. Why is she whispering? She should be screaming and shouting. Captain Chromo is saying, why is she whispering in a time of urgency? Absolutely. That's why they need to play this tape in closing. Okay, folks? From the start of the law enforcement initiation showing up, being called, everything about this case goes crazy. Absolutely crazy.
I don't know if he's breathing. There are two women trying to do his body heat, and they're hysterical.
Okay.
Why would you say they're, of course they're trying to do something for body heat. They're trying to keep them alive. And she acts like she's faulting them for trying to do that. And they're hysterical. Why would you even mention that? Unless you're bothered by it, you should be hysterical. You should be freaking out. You should be freaking out enough that you're not just sitting there in a car staying warm. You should be running in the house, kicking in the front door, which, by the way, wasn't even locked. You could be running up there screaming right away instead of waiting till later. So something looks so suspicious with all this. There's other things going on that obviously are not coming clean as of yet.
Can you just try to ask him? I know it's tough, but we already have the fire department going. I just got to know if he's breathing.
Is he breathing, you guys?
Okay, the fire department. Well, what about the ambulance? Right? They have paramedics there, but they can't haul John O'Keefe away without an ambulance there. So why is she saying get an ambulance here right away? It's just so revealing, folks. It's just so revealing. Carrie B, you're saying I can't find the blankets. She's talking about baby blankets Carrie keeps in her car. You know where there's a lot of big blankets? Right there in your sister's house, Jen. Great point. These are the kind of things defense needs to like hammer away at in cross-examination. Parker's Planet. Perhaps Jen's idea to change plan to blame Karen once Karen phoned her looking for John and mentioned she may have hit John's car. Not John. Then Jen called who? So this is something that a jury is going to pick up on, and this is not the first time I've seen this point. So that's something that defense could argue as well. Lisa Lee, you're saying Jen, what time he got there, right? So 12:45. She never. I mean, that makes it more urgent, right? If you said, "Hey, he came to the house around 12:30." I know Karen's car was still there at 12:45. Then I'd seen after that, so around a little bit after 12:45 or minutes later is when he would have been dropped off, right? So, yeah, exactly. She says, "I don't know. Could have been a few hours." Well, there's a big difference if you're out in the cold and you're dying. You got serious head wounds between a couple hours and that many more hours, taking it from almost 1 o'clock to after 6 o'clock in the morning. So that's over 5 hours. PJ, you're saying Karen was out in the front of Fairview at 1:45, yet Karen was home connected to John's Wi-Fi at 12:36 a.m. Boom. All right. She said it was actually 12:45, not 1:45. But yeah, I get your point. This is critical stuff. It's gold mine stuff to hit home in cross-examination as well as your closing. And I've done this, by the way. I've played when there's such critical information of a witness being played, and you have the it's so important to get that to the jury. I think it's critical you play that in the closing.
It doesn't seem to be breathing.
Okay, do they know how to do CPR? Do they want to attempt CPR?
You guys, Carrie, get up. Can you
See how calm she says that? He doesn't appear to be breathing. She's not worried about him. Does that sound like somebody worried about him? No, it sounds like a stranger showing up, seeing, even a stranger would be more alarmed over seeing somebody in this condition. We saw what the photos looked like of John after he was taken in. His eyes swollen up so bad. And then you have the discrepancy even about whether he was found face down or on his back. So you got a discrepancy between Carrie and Jen McCabe saying that. So Mustang Sally Port saying she knows he got out of the car. Absolutely.
You guys do CPR? No, I guess he's gone.
Okay. They don't feel comfortable doing so?
Right. No, I think she's passed away.
Why is she whispering?
Okay. All right, we got the fire department and the police department on the way.
Is he breathing, you guys? No. It doesn't seem to be breathing.
Okay, do they know how to do CPR? Do they want to attempt?
Does he seem to be breathing, guys? Does she sound frantic? Hey, is he still breathing? Hurry, send the ambulance. He may not be breathing anymore. Where's the ambulance? Wouldn't you be asking how soon is the ambulance going to get here? Why is she even asking that at this point? All these are huge, massive indicators.
Can you guys, Carrie, can you guys do CPR? No,
Why don't you get your brother-in-law out there?
Okay. They don't feel comfortable doing so?
Right. No, I think she's passed away.
Okay. All right, we got the fire department and the police department on the way. If everyone's declining CPR, then I can't.
Okay, so he's saying here.
No. It doesn't seem to be breathing.
Okay, do they know how to do CPR? Do they want to attempt CPR?
Can you guys, Carrie, can you guys do CPR?
No.
Okay.
Like, can you guys do CPR? Like, what are you watching? What are you doing sitting in there and watching? And if nobody's doing CPR, why aren't you running with your phone and running through the front door and getting Brian Albert out of the bed?
Is he breathing, you guys? No. It doesn't seem to be breathing.
Okay, do they know how to do CPR? Do they want to attempt CPR?
Can you guys, Carrie, can you guys do CPR? No, I guess he's gone.
Okay. They don't feel comfortable doing so?
No, he's gone. I'm not upset about it, but he's gone. No asking about where the ambulance has been, or it doesn't matter. It's not a big deal, apparently.
Right. No, I think she's passed away.
Okay. All right, we got the fire department and the police department on the way.
Fire department, please. Where's the ambulance coming? Where's the ambulance coming?
If everyone's declining CPR, then I'll hang up with you, and if anything changes, you can give us a call back. Where are you guys outside?
Oh, right out front of his car. I know, I'm on the phone with the ambulance. I know, honey, I know.
Let's go back to this.
Do CPR? Do they want to attempt CPR?
Can you guys, Carrie, can you guys do CPR? No, I guess he's gone.
Okay. They don't feel comfortable doing so?
Right. No, I think she's passed away.
Okay. All right, we got the fire department and the police department on the way. If everyone's declining CPR, then I'll hang up with you, and if anything changes, you can give us a call back. Where are you guys outside?
Oh, right out front of his car. I know, I'm on the phone with the ambulance. I know.
Wait.
I know, honey, I know.
Now she says she's on the phone with the ambulance. She's trying to assure Karen that she's on the phone with the ambulance. She never once mentions ambulance to the operator, the 911 dispatcher. So huge, massive clues, like I say. So they just need to nail this on their closing, and they need to nail Jen McCabe when she's testifying. Full melt hash values, you're saying she actually told the truth about how long you've been out there. She said a few hours, but it's more than a few hours. It's like 5+. Let's Tango, they absolutely played this for the first jury, and even after 2 days testimony, none of it seemed to impact jury. How? Well, that was that past jury, and they like I say, had that cop as a foreman, and he tried to put a spin on everything. So hopefully they won't have that issue again. Somebody that's handpicked by the judge. But like I say, I'd play it in the closing, not drive that point home. Reasonable doubt needs to be driven home and just hammered away.
So, Carrie, you got to get off him, honey. Carrie.
Carrie, you got to get him off him, honey. Are you serious? So now we got Jen McCabe telling Carrie to get off him. Well, if he's dead, what are you worried about her being on top of him, trying to wake him back up? Maybe this looks like he's dead. You're trying to get him alive, right? Make sure he doesn't pass away. This is such a massive indicator again. I'm going to back that up.
Oh, I know. I'm on the phone with the ambulance. I know, honey. I know.
He's not
This,
She's trying to calm everybody down because she's so calm herself. Why is she so calm?
phone with the ambulance. I know.
Carrie didn't say she
I
loved
know,
him.
honey. I know.
He's not
This, so, Carrie, you got to get off him, honey. Carrie, you got to
Unbelievable.
get off of him.
Twice telling her to get off him.
Do you know if there was any alcohol or drugs involved?
They had been out.
He.
They had been out.
Yeah, don't want to say that he was at the Albert's house. He's in the front yard of Boston Police Detective Brian Albert.
They've been out drinking.
Yes, but I'm talking hours ago, maybe. And I don't know how long he's been in the snow.
Okay.
Really? Let's back that up.
Out.
They've been out drinking.
They've been out drinking.
Yes, but I'm talking hours ago, maybe. And I don't know how long he's been in the snow.
Okay.
I don't know how long he's been in the snow. Okay. Does that sound like very alarming? All this is whispering.
Any bleeding or anything? Maybe hit his head out.
Yes, possibly. There seems to be bleeding in the face.
Okay.
And so this guy has to ask about bleeding because she's not bringing it up to him. She should say, look, there's blood all over him. It looks like he's dying. Send an ambulance. Hurry. There's a police officer. None of it. Kiska, you're saying it's so clear that she's unnatural on this call. It makes no sense. Lizzie, she said a couple hours, not 6 hours. Basically, you're saying she doesn't want to ask him the questions dispatch is telling her ask. It's so strange of a behavior. I've never seen anybody like this on a 911 call before. Have you guys? Sam, you're saying she purposely didn't specify amount of time he's been in cold because a plan, quote unquote, hasn't been concocted at this point. Lenny, you're saying there's so much to this call than I realized. Bugs Bunny, no mention of helping rendered. How did she just find this guy? It is so contrived. Exactly. That's the way it comes across.
Bleeding from the face. All right.
Yes.
And how big's the pool of blood, if there is any?
Something's coming out of his nose, and one of the women is doing CPR.
Okay, one of the women is doing CPR?
Yes, they're both working on him.
All right.
They're both working on him, right? And where do we have somebody that's a trained first responder in the house who owns that front yard? Her brother-in-law, and nothing's being done by her to get her brother-in-law out there. So what's in the house that she doesn't want to draw attention to? This is the kind of way she needs to be cross-examined in this trial. Put some heat on her.
If she's doing CPR, just let me, just give us a call back if he becomes responsive, right? But we're on the way.
Okay, thank you.
She didn't say when. Again, none. When is this ambulance going to show up? They've been on the phone all this time and nothing about how soon is the ambulance going to get here, where they're at, none of it. So right there, you see it for what it is, folks. Right there, you have each one of those responses of hers is reasonable doubt, okay? Massive reasonable doubt. Parker's Planet, if they're so hysterical, go get the cop inside. Yeah, because they don't know how to do first aid. PJ, none of them attended John's funeral. Let that sink in. I think Jen McCabe is the only one that showed up, maybe her and Matt, but the Albert surely didn't. They drive all the way down to New York for some cops they didn't know that got killed in the line of duty. But John O'Keefe got killed in their front yard. No, we're not going to show up to that. Carrie B, you're saying that's why Jen keeps talking about how they're hysterical. She was told to keep things quiet as possible. Yeah, don't wake up the neighborhood. Maya Rodriguez Sorensen, Esquire, please let Karen's Legal be watching this. Blue Eyes, you're saying, and her husband Matt is telling Jen to tell Karen Reed to shut up. Deplorable. Kathy Prosser is saying she didn't want him to be alive. He could have been told what happened to him in that basement, down in that basement, what happened in that house down in that basement. So these are the kind of things as jurors they would pick up on. They would have these thoughts. These kind of thoughts are reasonable doubt thoughts. Mandy's saying if you didn't know what happened, you'd be frustrated and be like, I don't know what happened. Please get here. Where's this ambulance? Full Melt, you're saying she knew what time he got out of the car and how long he'd been there. Yeah, even this 911 dispatcher, he's not saying, do they know CPR? Do they know what they're doing? Let me talk to one of them. None of this is happening the way it should be. If you got a person down, let alone a police officer. Captain Chromo, meanwhile, Karen is screaming in the background. Yeah, because she's the one that loves him, right? Maya saying still no mention of him being law enforcement officer. Yeah, that's a good data point to hit home. This whole time never says he's a police officer. That's just this is golden for the defense. Massive golden nuggets. It shows that this something was going on hokey even before Karen showed up there. Uncommon Wealth, you're saying Karen's and John's voicemail picks up all of Jen's whispers in the car when she calls Nicole and says she didn't call her. Yeah, I've heard that as well. I've not heard the audio of it good enough that I can make it out. So, but that's I'm tracking that being said. Why would she again be whispering to her sister? Millie Jane saying the fact she isn't banging down the door of the cop that lives there while she's talking on 911. Yeah, well, that's her brother-in-law of all people. Full Melt says the dog would be going absolutely bananas at all of this yelling in their front yard. Absolutely. Where was that dog? Crystal says the same thing. Give him a holiday. You're saying she wasn't herself hysterical because she had hours to prepare. Herbert Birch, why didn't they immediately bring him to the house? You know, somebody's about to die because of cold. I know they say maybe don't bring somebody in because if they're injured, you know, if there's neck injuries, you can make it worse, something like that, or spinal injuries. But if the guy's about to die, you know, get Albert out of the bed and tell him to carry him into the house, for crying out loud. She should have been honking the horn if she's not going to run in the house again, and calling up Brian's number, calling up her sister's number. Get out here, hurry. No, keep it low profile. Whisper to the 911 dispatcher. Yep, blankets and first responder in the house. It was 12:36 a.m. is when she connected John's Wi-Fi. Let's Tango, you're saying they focus on all this in opening, closing, and cross. There's been a lot of criticism for it. How do you present this without bringing out conspiracy? Play the tape in closing, and you need to be able to get in their face more. I would say, don't be as calm. I would act excited and confrontational, sort of like I did tonight. Lizzie, 3 women cannot lift 225 pounds of dead weight. That's not reasonable. Yeah, they could have each grabbed a leg, and John, Brian Albert could have carried John into his house. Absolutely. Tall Glass, you're saying she called John O'Keefe multiple times and texted him as well, right? Yet finds out when he's injured, she's whispering. Fisher White, you're in agreement. 100% suspicious. Trooper from Carolina, why is she whispering? Yeah, I mean that. I've never heard of that before. Someone wanting an ambulance show up, you don't mention ambulance, and you're whispering. Full melt. I think he's passed away. She never went up to the body. Swampy's saying it's not that she's not worried; it's that she knows that he's been there all night and is supposed to be dead, so he can't rat on what they did to him. I mean, there's something hokey going on here. Kathy Prosser, you're saying she's not telling me that Karen's been doing CPR already. Yeah, Karen was doing the most, right? That's what I gather. Riverbird sounds like she's having a conversation in the library. Yeah, just the fact that if she suspected he's passed away, you'd think she'd freak out at that point. She never gets upset about it at all. Not at all. Standard Beatles fan, you're saying in the first trial, the prosecution had her husband testify that Jen is calm in a crisis, trying to get ahead of her calmness. Yeah, that sounds so contrived, doesn't it? Trying to keep the language clean here, folks. Don't need to call anybody names. We can describe actions, but trying to keep away the name calling. Trying to keep it courtroom level here. So Trooper Carolina, you're saying entire case is screwed up from that call to the end. Absolutely. And including in the courtroom with the prosecution and the judge the way they are. Sally Williams says this phone call doesn't scream not guilty for Karen Reed. Nothing will. Common sense. Absolutely. I mean, we have so many reasonable doubts on this phone call itself, and it's not a lengthy call as well. Crystal saying she's certified in CPR. She's a basketball coach. So she doesn't offer that help, does she, or give any guidance? Yeah, especially if somebody's dying or dead. You don't, on 911 and say, well, call us back, something changes. Well, no, you keep them online. How do you know there's not going to be more shots fired, or I guess initial shots fired? You don't know exactly how he's dead. I mean, it's just terrible, terrible services up there for the community in Canton. Carrie Retchless, she should be screaming or saying, we need help now, yelling and screaming. PG, you're saying that John wasn't placed outside till after the 3:30 a.m. because lucky the snowplow driver had passed twice by. That could be a very reasonable deduction by the jury. Again, reasonable doubt. Yeah, Angie, they tell you to do CPR. Exactly. They don't just say, oh, they're doing CPR. Well, how do they know it? What are exactly to describe what they're doing? And a lot of times they'll ask to speak to the person that's doing it or hold a phone to their ear. None of that was going on here. Carrie B saying the truth was out there that he was out there a few hours. So since 4 a.m., she leaked the truth. Okay, retired trooper Carolina saying he's speechless. He's nothing else to say. This is unbelievable. This should have been suspicious right away. I understand the audit done by the Five Stones. Didn't find anything unusual with this call. I mean, this is like, don't have any common sense, folks. Just do what the government tells you happened, and don't have any independent thought or critical thinking skills. Sandra Beatles fan, if he was out over 5 hours, he had no frostbite. That doesn't line up to the time frame. Let's Tango. Why tell her to stop doing CPR? Blood flows better, chance of surviving brain activity. Absolutely. She saw she flipped from said hours and I don't know. Jody saying they can't say they're at a party at the house. Jane Brown is saying Jen whispered he's dead because one, if he's dead, there's no urgency for an ambulance, and two, didn't want Karen and Carrie to hear her saying it, knowing that Jen never went near John O'Keefe to see how he was. Wow. Everyone can hear how loud Karen was screaming at Brian Albert, his wife, and his dog slept through all the noise. Yeah, that's just not credible. German Shepherds, wow, they'd be waking up the neighborhood. Teacup crack, and I had more emotion when I was calling the police about an alarm going off at my neighbors. Okay, GP drug drill. The audio is so bad in the courtroom you can hear most of it. That's why you don't think you heard it. Well, they need to get a better version. The defense needs to preserve that. Get a better version to play. Parker's point. How do they know he's not been drugged and beaten? Matilda also saying it doesn't sound like somebody she loves. Leslie's vocabulary, she tries to sound so endearing by calling Carrie honey. I mean, would you really be using a honey if you're in shock and you're frantic trying to get help for John O'Keefe, a person you love? No. Solner Foster, she told Karen you have to get Karen off him. So Karen, she wants Karen to stop CPR. Charles transform. You say, meanwhile, Karen is trying to save her boyfriend's life. Poor Karen, absolutely. Spencer B. Jen never got out of the car during 911 call. That is huge red flag right there of suspicion. Jane Brown, you're saying Jen desperately didn't want to help drive too soon to save John O'Keefe's life. As if he's dead, don't bother hurrying up. Well, that's what a reasonable juror might think. Loud booming voice. Well, you got to have one in the courtroom when stuff starts getting crazy and people lying. You better dial up the voice pressure and let him know you're not going to condone those lies in the courtroom. Swampy, listening to this, is clear that Jen is doing her damnedest to keep the Alberts out of this entire process. Why it's disturbingly unreal. She only later went there to talk to them alone. Somebody sent me a picture of Brian Albert with a sling on his arm. I don't know the date of that, but thank you for sending that. But if the defense has that, they should try to use that as well. Assuming they got some kind of timestamp on that, date and timestamp. Yeah, Alessi's verbal pharmacy. I've been saying that they never let you off the phone. And if you don't know CPR, they tell you how. Listen to Sarah Boone's call. She tries not to, and they make her. Yeah, Tammy Dube, you're saying the puddle of blood that the cop asked about. Well, it's actually a 911 dispatcher. That dispatcher asked questions specific to injuries. She never said any injuries. She didn't describe injuries because guess what? If you describe the injuries, he's got blood coming out of his ears, his nose, his mouth, his eyes are swollen up, or at least the one was like a golf ball. He's got gash coming out of his head because she said they had to flip him over. So yeah, why not describe the scene, the gruesome, bloody scene? Although there wasn't a whole lot of blood, given the nature of the injuries. would suggest body movement. He had blood on his body like that, on his face and whatnot. That should have been spoken out right away. They shouldn't have had to draw that out of her. JC, they have to show the jury the picture of him in the snow, and if they don't have it, the police yanked it and hit it. No one gets the magnitude of what he did. I'd use a lot of exhibits. The prosecution got to use an exhibit chart to argue off of in the first trial. Defense needs to just push this through and make sure they have something to show, and they need to play tapes like this, show the injuries to John's arm and that to the jury, remind them all this stuff is just massive amount of reasonable doubt. Spencer B., you're saying John was on his back. How did she know he was hitting the head? Well, she testified they originally had to roll him over. Carrie said he was on his back to begin with, so there's a discrepancy there. Give him a holiday. This whole route with Jen and Carrie searching for John O'Keefe looks senseless, driving around like purposely stalling for time. A lot of people think that. Folks on the jury should, some of them anyway, should be thinking the same thing as well. That should come up in discussions, deliberations. Lisa Lee, Jen's first thought she'd been run inside and check her sister and nephew. Yeah. Why didn't she? If you don't know what happened to John outside and you're just suddenly coming across as, why wouldn't you run inside? River Birch, the defense needs to press the issue of her Google search according to Celebrate. In no way not a way to manipulate the timestamp on a search. Patty P., you're saying that the conscience of guilt not going to the funeral looks very suspicious. That can be a reasonable doubt right there. So Great happens. You're saying I find on that Jen said on stand she couldn't see John, but on the 911 call described his injuries from the cabin of the car. RN, you're saying, hey, we need blankets, get something to wrap him up. Nothing. She just whispers, scarlet for someone she loved. Yeah, I mean, you'd be screaming to 911, get an ambulance here. He may be dying. He's been out here for hours. Looks like he's almost dead. He's got blood all over. I mean, you'd be given a lot of detailed descriptions, not stalling and only answering direct questions and never saying he's a police officer. Come on. Eliza Krogan, you're saying, why didn't she tell the medical he was invited to his house or the dispatcher? It's all distancing, folks. It's all deflection. Sam, you're saying Allie had to say a story about a stray dog just in case Vito caught her with a vehicle and showed a dog. Leslie's verbal. You're saying, I think Caitlin took Chloe since it's her family dog when Tristan mysteriously picked her up. Home Life Vegas, you're thinking the same thing. Carol Herzog, you're saying Brian Schuller's already injured from dragging him out there. That's the kind of stuff defense should be arguing. Bugs Bunny's brother, no neighbors heard anything either. Commotion in a policeman's driveway, you think would make them concerned if something's wrong at the cop's house. And what about the cop that lived across the street? He was the deputy chief of a division, the police department. Yes, Trooper Caroline is saying a small town, everybody knows where everybody lives. Everybody who knows who lives at that address and knew on the way. The chiefs across the street knew. They all had seen the blue lights. Yeah, all that commotion going on. And no, none of the police officers on either side of the street wake up. No, that's not credible. Hold on a second. Some cats biting outside. Stand by. Once in a while, we got a neighbor's cat that goes after our cats, a bully cat. River Birch, why would Karen do CPR if she murdered him? There's nothing about Karen that her actions, all the criminal cases, 1,000 criminal cases I've done over in my lifetime as a lawyer in the criminal law arena, you see consistency and patterns, how people act and react. And there's nothing, as I've said before, there's nothing about Karen's behavior that indicates that that she had any desires to hurt John O'Keefe. Yeah, was she mad at him? Absolutely. Was she? Did she have too much drink? Absolutely. I think that her saying she doesn't remember anything is probably accurate, and that was then a useful tool to then take advantage of that situation. If she doesn't remember going to 34 Fairview, then guess what? Then she can easily be the scapegoat. So I've had that happen before where clients don't know exactly what happened, especially if they drink hard liquor. They can have a complete blackout. There is such a thing as alcoholic blackout. And if you're taking any medication as well, that can also affect it. If you're taking especially medicine that's not supposed to be taken with alcohol and you're drinking hard liquor, that can definitely cause blackout kind of thing. So there's not any indications whatsoever that this is a murder case. Not at all. Christy, you're saying the most emotionless 911 call I've ever heard. Yeah, especially if something that serious. And somebody you love, no. Daria, why isn't Jen saying on the call saying that he was hit by a car? He was passed out, according to her. That's a great point. right alongside the road there. Maybe he's hit by a car. Carrie B, they took chief deputy's word for it that there was nothing to see on his camera across the street. Yeah, really? Crystal, I didn't see your language, but yeah, it fires a lot of us up. Okay, Jim S. Every time Jackson would bring the heat, judge would shut him down. Well, they need to be ready, loaded to bear with case law. And when she does those objections and stuff like that, they need to have a sidebar every time and just build a record. Just keep building a record. Trooper Carolina talking about the Ford Edge. And as a trooper, he'd have the names for everybody in the house. He can use his mobile computer, run all the names, show all the cars that the person owns and their address. They didn't do it. It's that easy. I've not seen this white paper from Sturm Group. Landblasting the audit, a great read. Okay, we should take a look at that. Thanks, Suzer. How will the Commonwealth explain the vomit in his boxers, on his boxers? I think that when you do get a hand injury, vomiting is a normal reaction that the body has, and so the fact that it was on his pants and on his boxers, I think that's just a matter of it soaking through. And he had a lot of liquid. He probably was throwing up as well, so that's why it would soak through everything. Erica, you're saying I wouldn't be surprised with Jen who introduced the idea in Karen's mind. So she hit John, and then Karen, in her confused state of mind, almost convinced herself she did hit him. Well, that makes sense. If you don't remember what happened, you're blacked out. You have basically a form of amnesia, alcoholic amnesia, on what happened the night before, and you're told no, you actually were the one that dropped him off. And oh, by the way, you would think, well, maybe did something he slip and fall, like Karen had said that in some kind of interview. Yeah, I thought maybe he would have slipped and fall or something. Maybe I had hurt him somehow. She just didn't know. And of course, you're going to blame yourself. It's just a normal reaction. So, did I hit him? Did I hit him? All that kind of stuff. I don't believe for a second that she actually said I did hit him, because she doesn't remember, right? Home Life Vegas, how did they happen to get a hold of the officer across the street with solo cups but not bother to ask Brian Albert for anything? He must have came out and offered that, because certainly Brian Albert didn't want to. Angie's saying rule is you don't ever stop CPR unless you're completely exhausted and can't go on. Andy School, you're saying on the trial channel, YouTube has witnesses days testified about subject discussed, stamped. Gallagher definitely showed wandless contaminating the bumper before the glass and hair found. Can't this show a bad crime scene? They just didn't do anything to preserve the evidence as they should on everything they touched. Everything is a complete disaster. They did not do anything by the book on any of it. Colin at Busted Knuckles also says Kimono, Indiana. Trooper Carolina saying this case, most corrupt case he's ever seen in the entire world. There's never been a case like this he's ever seen. The corruption runs deep. It's a good old boy system. It's a shame, 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 shame. Yeah, you really can't find one that's this bad. End of line. They never took any photos of him before taking him to the hospital. Yeah, really? The Shady Bunch, thank you for your services. Seasoned EMT, you guys got a tough job. Thank you for your service. I would be calm on a 911 call, but not if it was my friend or someone I loved. Absolutely. You'd be in hysterics. All right, so now I'm going to bring something else up. This thing here, when I've mentioned this case before, this is Davis v. Alaska. It's a landmark case on cross-examination. I've used it many times and cited it in court to get the judge to agree with the line of questioning. And basically, this was a case where conviction of the defendant was reversed. He was convicted of grand larceny and burglary. And it had to do with the prosecutor objecting to a line of questioning when they're trying to cross-examine somebody that was like a complaining witness that actually could have been a suspect as well, and trying to pin it on the wrong person, the defendant. And here it was held that the defense was entitled to attempt to show that Green was biased. Green was the witness against the defendant, and Green was on probation as a juvenile delinquent. And the fact that his status as juvenile delinquent was kept out and could have served as a basis for this guy trying to avoid getting in trouble because he's on probation. So that was like something that's key detail to bring out of their motives to fabricate. And the trial court didn't allow it. And they basically said it was like, well, juvenile records supposed to be protected. And even though Sixth Amendment right to confrontation of witnesses against the defendant is etched in the Constitution, it's like, we're going to go ahead and err on the side of protecting this witness. So the judge kept it out. So up on appeal here, it went all the way to Supreme Court. And the petitioner's right of confrontation is paramount to the state's policy of protecting juvenile offenders, and any temporary embarrassment to Green by disclosure of his juvenile court record and probation status is outweighed by the petitioner's right to effectively cross-examine a witness. So that's sort of come out when you hear stuff about Colin Albert and stuff like that. Like, he's gone through so much and all that kind of stuff. Well, guess what? This is what the Constitution requires. The defense should be able to bring up evidence showing that other people could have been involved in it, and they don't have to prove anything. They just have to raise issues of connections to how the people acted in that house. And if it doesn't make any sense, that's reasonable doubt right there. So it's not like you have to prove to the court or the jury that anybody did this. There's no proof that anybody in the house actually committed the murder against John O'Keefe. There's no direct proof. There's no proof beyond a reasonable doubt or anything like that. So It can be speculation, conjecture. It can be suspicious. It can be a distrust of everything these people said that was in the house, where you're thinking, you know what, something else happened, and they're just not telling the truth. And you don't have to actually individually say, well, it must be this guy over that guy. It must be Colin Albert over Brian Albert or Higgins. And I mean, you don't have to like name any particular one. So all you have to do is raise the issue like, hey, something else is going on here that doesn't make sense. And that's a hesitation to act that would make you to not be in a position to find Karen Reed guilty of murder because there's too many questions unanswered. And then keep in mind, the burden is not on the defense. The complete and total burden is on the prosecution. It says here, although prevented from revealing that Green, remember that's prosecution against the defendant, Davis, had been on probation for the juvenile delinquency adjudication for burglary. At the same time, he originally identified petitioner being the defendant, Davis. Counsel for petitioner did his best to expose Green's state of mind at the time Green discovered that a stolen safe had been discovered near his house. Green denied that he was upset or uncomfortable about discovery of the safe. He claimed he claimed not to have been worried about any suspicions the police might have expected to harbor against him, although Green did admit that it crossed his mind that police might have thought he had something to do with the crime. Okay, so that could be very much similar to what we have here with some of the witnesses in the house. And here they'll go into the cross-examination of Green in part. It says, were you upset at all the fact that the safe was found on your property? No, sir. Oh, really? And you're on probation and they could revoke your probation? Did you feel uncomfortable about this though? No, not really. The fact that the safe was found on your property? No. Did you suspect for a moment that police might somehow think you're involved in this? I thought they might ask a few questions is all. Did that thought ever enter your mind that the police might think you were somehow connected with this? And then he said, no, it really didn't bother me. And then anyway, I won't go into every single detail, but when they down here asked, have you ever been questioned like this before by law enforcement officers? He said, no. So here he's actually saying a lie here, because as a juvenile, when he's arrested for the burglary and theft, he would have been questioned like that. So anyway, so this is a perfect time for the defense to say, hey, well, you were on probation for doing the same thing practically. And so the court sustained an objection that says here, since the defense counsel was prohibited from making an inquiry as to the witness being on probation under a juvenile court adjudication, Green's protestation of unconcern over possible police suspicion that he might have had a part in the Polar Bar burglary and his categorical denial of ever having been the subject of any similar law enforcement interrogation went unchallenged. Yeah, so that's the whole thing. This defendant was denied a right to cross-examine the main witness against him, and it's actually the property actually found at his house. So the court goes on to say the tension between the right to confront and the state's policy of protecting the witness with a juvenile record is particularly evident in the final answer given by the witness. Since it is probable that Green underwent some questioning by the police when he was arrested for the burglary on which his juvenile adjudication of delinquency rested, the answer can be regarded as highly suspect at the very least. So there you go. You don't need proof. You just have to be suspicious of some behavior of the witness. And here he's saying to them, it doesn't sound right. So the court goes on to say the witness was, in effect, asserting under protection of a trial court's ruling the right to give a questionable, truthful answer to a cross-examiner pursuing a relevant line of inquiry. It is doubtful whether the bold no answer would have been given by Green, absent a belief that he was shielded from traditional cross-examination. So that's what you have here. You have Judge Cannoni constantly shielding the prosecution witnesses from being asked legitimate, tough questions. The defense has a right to get up in their face. They should be raising their voices. That's what the Constitution guarantees with the Bill of Rights. And that's being effectively denied each and every stage of this first trial. And it's going to get even worse. I predict it's going to get even worse during this trial. So the whole court is a constitutional void. It's a sham. Everything I've seen so far, this is a complete abomination and abortion of the constitutional rights that are afforded. And let's go on to see here what else this says. It would be difficult to conceive of a situation more clearly illustrating the need for cross-examination. Well, that's exactly what we got here with Karen Reed. Because people were in the house and they said he never came out of the house. Of course, they're going to circle the wagons. That's a normal human behavior. If something bad happens in a house, they're all going to say, no, we didn't do that. Like, think about it. If there was a situation where, let's just say John O'Keefe drove down the street and he was at a bar with a bunch of other cops, and he drives down the street, he gets in an accident, kills a van with 5 people in it. They're going to wonder, okay, is this an issue where somebody gave him too much alcohol to drink and they let him drive drunk? What are people going to say? Oh, we didn't see John. No, if they go back to the bar, people can say, oh, we didn't see him. We don't know anything about John. Yeah, we know that he was. Somebody says, well, they dropped him off here and they waited to see if he wanted to stay in the bar or not. And he never came out, so his ride took off. And then for hours later, 5-6 hours later, they find him laying out in front of the bar. Do you think nobody in the bar would ever be questioned? Do you think they wouldn't go inside the bar and find out, hey, what's going on? It's typical human reaction. If something happened in a place of residence, you don't want the police snooping around and finding out that the person was there. So just like similar things that it happens all the time where people deny so-and-so was there. No, he never came here, because then the criminal activity investigation would go further into those people. So to blanketly deny that that someone came into our residence where there was suspicion of something afoot, criminal activity afoot, is a normal reaction. And so with Judge Cannoni, it's sort of like, well, nothing can spontaneously happen where somebody has a motive to beat John O'Keefe up. That would have to happen many days or months. There'd have to be a lot of proof beyond reasonable doubt for something to spontaneously happen to attack John O'Keefe. And because that you don't have any longstanding significant proof, then guess what? Then you can't bring in third-party culprit defense for Colin Albert, and it's touch and go whether she's going to allow that on Brian Albert and Brian Higgins. So let's keep that in mind, and I'm gonna go on a little bit further here on the details of this opinion. It says here, the remainder of the cross-examination was devoted to an attempt to prove that Green was making his identification at trial based on the basis that he remembered from his earlier identification at the photographic display and lineup, not the basis of his February 16 confession with the 2 men on the road. And so the Supreme Court affirmed the conviction. So then the Supreme Court here, this is, like I say, this is a landmark case on the right to confront a witness. So it says here, the Sixth Amendment to the Constitution guarantees the right of an accused to a criminal prosecution be confronted with the witnesses against him. This right is secured for defendants in state as well as federal proceedings under Pointer v. Texas. And that's where they say the 14th Amendment applies to the state. So the Sixth Amendment and its applicability to the federal government is then also bootstrapped in by the 14th Amendment, as well as all the amendments are bootstrapped in to the states by virtue of the 14th Amendment. And it says here, confrontations means more than being allowed to confront a witness physically. Our cases construing the confrontation clause hold that the primary interest secured by it is the right of cross-examination, citing another Supreme Court case from 1965. And then it cites Professor Wigmore, who's a really famed expert on the law, that said the main essential purpose of confrontation is to secure for the opponent the opportunity of cross-examination. The opponent demands confrontation not for the idle purpose of giving the witness or being gazed upon by him, but for the purpose of cross-examination, which cannot be exempt by the direct and personal putting of questions and obtaining immediate answers. So you need to have direct and personal putting of questions and immediate answers. Not all these objections, not all these sustained by the judge, where she's keeping all these critical questions from being answered, witness after witness for the prosecution. It's just such an unfair trial. And it goes on to state, citing another Wigmore quote, cross-examination of principal means by which the believability of a witness and the truth of his testimony are tested, subject always to the broad discretion of the trial judge to preclude repetitive and unduly harassing interrogation. So unless it's like you're asking the same thing over and over again, unless it's truly harassing a witness, you can point the finger at anybody else as being a suspect of a crime if you got a defendant that you're representing and your client, the defendant, is saying, I didn't do this. I didn't do this. Somebody else had to do this. And you got all this evidence indicating that Karen Reed was not involved in this. So somebody else had to do it. There's no burden on you to prove it. You just have to, as a defense counsel, show that, hey, something else doesn't add up. All these other people are acting very strange or acting suspicious. So the burden never shifts to Karen Reed to come up with an explanation as to who actually did it, right? So keep that in mind. The cross-examiner is not only permitted to delve into the witness story to test the witness's perception and memory, but to, now I can't read the rest of that, darn it. How do I make this slide thing go away? Yeah, it's that, I got this shadow covering over there, so I can't cover that, sorry. But you can Google this case yourself and find out these details if you're interested. It says here, by doing so, the cross-examiner intends to afford the jury a basis to infer that the witness's character is such that he'll be less likely than the average trustworthy citizen to be truthful in his testimony. And they're saying that introduction of evidence of a prior crime is thus a general attack on the credibility of the witness. A more particular attack on the witness credibility is affected by means of cross-examination directed towards revealing possible biases, prejudice, or ulterior motives of the witness as they may relate directly to issues or personalities in the case at hand. So there you have it, the motives, the prejudices, and you have directly to the issue. So the direct issue you have here in this case with Karen Reed is, well, who else could have caused these injuries? So anybody else that it was in that house should be questioned as a possible suspect. Defense should do that. Otherwise, they're ineffective. And it says here in the instant case, defense counsel sought to show the evidence of possible bias and prejudice of Green, causing him to make a faulty initial identification of petitioner, which in turn could have been affected his later in-court identification of petitioner. So here, I look at it as more motive than bias and prejudice of Green. He didn't care if he's falsely accusing somebody else. But that's something that defense counsel should have been allowed to. It says here, we cannot speculate as to whether the jury, as the sole judge of credibility of witness, would have accepted this line of reasoning had counsel been permitted to fully present it. But we do conclude that the jurors were entitled to have the benefit of the defense theory before them so that they could make an informed judgment as to the weight to place on Green's testimony, which provided a crucial link of proof of the petitioner's act. Okay, so right there, you could tie this in the argument. If you're defense counsel for Karen Reed, I could see them using this case law to cite the fact that they need to question every witness in the house as if they're a suspect and they have motive to fabricate of them not being a suspect. And you don't have to have, like I say, a long-standing history. This petitioner, this defendant, did not have a long-standing history with the guy that pointed the finger at him, this Green guy, right? He just picked him out of a lineup. And apparently it could have been a wrong lineup as well, but this guy had motive to fabricate. So obviously everybody in the house has a motive to fabricate. That's just a general nature of how things are in the criminal law setting, especially when you have someone like Karen Reed that says, I didn't do it. All right, next we have the accuracy and truthfulness of Green's testimony. So substitutes any of that of prosecution witnesses in Karen Reed's case were key elements in the state's case against petitioner. the claim of bias which the defense thought to develop was admissible to afford a basis for inference of undue pressure because of Green's vulnerable status as a probationer, as well as Green's possible concern that he might be a suspect in the investigation. So right there, you got it. Everybody in the house has to be a concern that they're a suspect in the investigation. What we just heard tonight about the Jen McCabe call, man, is she backpedaling, downplaying all this, trying to make it look like this is nothing to see here, nothing to see at 34 Fairview. I had to give you this address, but nothing to look at on the lawn or in the house, nothing to see here. Being quiet so it's not, wake the neighbors. We don't want to have anybody show up too fast to help John O'Keefe out. So this is how you hammer away at the prosecution. You expose them. You just hit them up with Supreme Court case law like this, and just be bold and courageous with this judge. And you got to have all these sidebars, and keep hammering away, because the more you let them just bully you around and push you around the courtroom with all this these sham rulings and motions and objections by the prosecution, the easier a chance they have to obtain a bogus conviction, a wrongful conviction. Okay. So being a possible suspect in investigation means that unless you're harassing them, and harassment would be like you're needlessly calling them names, you're doing something way out of line, you're acting unprofessional. And the other thing they talked about is repetitive nature of your questions. You can't ask the same question over and over and over again, like multiple times the same question, where you just basically stall in the court. So unless that's happening, you should allow the defense to go at the prosecution witnesses and wire brush these witnesses all you want. Get up in their face, be loud at them, and try to rattle them and get their words confronted with the fact that you have all these changing stories about, for example, Jen McCabe, about what did Jen say and when did she say it, and then she keeps embellishing it, and then finally at trial she's leading it to the point where Jen says, I hit him, to words to that effect. I mean, that is huge type of stuff. And granted, the judge let that kind of stuff in, but they should also be allowed to really get more confrontational than they have been so far. The jury should be able to see that through the body language, the voice, the demeanor of the defense attorneys, that they are really onto someone lying here. It shouldn't be just all this milquetoast, plain language that just doesn't have any loud voice in the courtroom that booms across the courtroom. And it goes on to say here, so after they just talk about being a suspect, goes on to say here that we cannot accept the Supreme Court's conclusion that the cross-examination that was permitted defense counsel was adequate to develop the issue of bias properly to the jury. While counsel was permitted to ask Green whether he was biased, counsel was unable to make a record from which to argue why Green might have been biased or otherwise lacked the degree of impartiality expected of a witness at trial. On the basis of the limited cross-examination that was permitted, the jury might have well thought the defense counsel was engaged in a speculative and baseless line of attack on the credibility of an apparent blameless witness. Wow, doesn't that sound familiar? Didn't we hear that from that juror, Ronnie, that this was all a distraction, what defense counsel was trying to do? Well, maybe they should have been allowed to get into more probing questions. Or as the prosecution's objection put it, a rehash of prior cross-examination. On these facts, it seems clear to us that to make any such inquiry effective, defense counsel should have been permitted to expose to the jury the facts from which the jurors, as the sole triers of facts and credibility, could appropriately draw inferences relating to the reliability of witnesses. Petitioner was thus denied the right of effective cross-examination, which would be constitutional error of the first magnitude, and no amount of showing of wanton prejudice would cure it. Wow, that's massive. So this you could have used this kind of court reasoning in conclusion to apply to many things in this trial, to include the arc of witnesses being denied the fact that they were initially hired by the feds to do an inquiry to find out really was there any linkage between Karen's vehicle and the body injuries to John O'Keefe. And so by this not being allowed in trial 1, and now we know it's being denied in trial 2, shows this right here proves how that violates it. Then there's other cases that we could go into that shows it's being violated. So that's when I do my rants about how this is so unconstitutional, I get so mad about seeing this kind of stuff going on against the defendant. Doesn't matter how guilty the defendant is, doesn't matter how innocent or anything in between. When you got a prosecution and judge just basically railroading and completely throwing out the Constitution and all the case law that explains it, and you're just going after vengeance against the defendant, we all need to be concerned about it. We all need to be concerned and speak out about it. So with that, I'm going to remove that case. So if you guys have any question on that case, I'll be happy to answer those now. But you see some parallels here. Red, you're saying the defense needs to do much more of the bleeding pattern too. He had boxer injuries. He was standing, dripping blood down. Yeah, if he got hit 30 feet and came to a resting spot there, then what the heck does he have blood down his shirt for? Deanna Belina, you're saying that I hit him was documented exactly 0 documents. It's been years, says DePriest Shelvin, but can luminol be used in Albert's old house lift for trace of blood? If so, would it still be testable? Yeah, I believe it still would. It's been a few years, but I believe it would be testable. I wish the jury could ask questions. Yeah, some states they allow it. In the military, we allow it. Kalani, the fact that they ended up back at third over Fairview to look for John is a big red flag. All right, let's see here. Behind in questionings, you guys have a lot of good comments here. Buttercup, you're saying also the police report initially wrote that John O'Keefe was in a fight in the police report. Yeah, I think the cross-examination with this court is going to be it's going to be even worse than it was before. It's going to be hard to watch, very hard to watch. Andy School, thank you. You liking the case? I know you're talking about some medical terminology, forensic terminology. Andy has a lot of background in that, but some of the terminology you're using, I'm not understanding, Andy. It's a little bit over my knowledge on forensic medicine. Angie, you're saying this is the reason not to trust anyone anymore, corruption everywhere. Yeah, I mean, isn't that sad? You can't even trust law enforcement and prosecutors and judges. Really sad state. Keep in mind, though, not everything is as bad as it is up there in Canton. Yes, Archie Cat, that was a case up here in Alaska that I've been talking about. Here we have some insight from the expert trooper, retired Carolina. Luminol could detect bloodstains in soil after 6 years, while intensity and duration of the chemiluminescence might change with age. Luminol's ability to detect blood remains. Thank you for that, sir. Bella Brat, for you, you're asking what are my thoughts on the judge not allowing speaking objections? Well, that is like that's what they have the rules for that state, and the defense wanted to have the ability to know what they are, and I just think that for the judge not to allow in a case like this, when you got a prosecutor continually objecting, it just turns the whole thing into basically, why not object to everything that's bad to your case being brought by the defense? Because the judge will then say, that is staying out, or else just say rephrase it. I'm like, how can you rephrase it any better? They're not doing anything wrong. It's perfectly legitimate. So it just turns that whole thing into what the prosecution is trying to do is intentionally confuse the defense, just cut them off the knees as they're trying to have some momentum on cross-examination. If you cut them off in your train of thought, you actually are making it harder for them to do their job. And the harder it is for them to do their job, the less effective they'll be on their cross-examination. So it's all a rigged system that way. Okay, Andy School, you're saying not brain injury from back and forth. Brain has local inverted areas of damage that aren't directly across, like brain bouncing back and forth. Coup contra coup. Focal means not entire perimeter. Okay, so that's not quite tracking that, Andy, but thanks for your input. Brain has local inverted areas of damage that, right? I think you're talking about John O'Keefe's brain that aren't directly across, like a brain bouncing forth and back. So you mean like it just not consistent with a vehicle strike? Then I think that's what you're trying to say here. Rachel, glad you could join. Yeah, this thing is really unbelievable. What's really sad about it is the degree that the rights are being trampled. Karen Reed's rights are absolutely being just obliterated here. Andy, you are saying that Brian Albert got a new cement floor before moving out and got rid of the carpet. Karen saw truck removing carpet. Investigators, so they got it from installers. She has a temporary controlled storage. Yeah, I heard it was something about because a toilet had overflown or something. So Stephen Wyco, why doesn't defense hire experts from Apple and Lexus to answer all the questions about disputed data, text messages about dials, health and data, etc.? Yeah, I don't know if that'd be more the cell provider than Apple or whatever, but somebody on here on the last live stream had knew one of the co-founders of the company that does the vehicle data for the Lexus. Buttercup, you're saying would there be a third trial for another hung jury? I believe they're out for blood, no matter how many times they can get away with trying the case. Bugs Bunny's brother, did I find any info about the automatic braking on the Lexus 570? No, not yet. I'm going to look that up tomorrow. Call around to some folks. Sam, you got a good point. Justice will work for no one if the process is corrupt. Yeah, Bella Bratt, for you, you're saying, but this isn't Massachusetts law per bad. But keep in mind, all these Supreme Court opinions that you find that are on point, they are controlling for Massachusetts. So Massachusetts isn't very protective and very, they don't have a good comprehension from the court opinions I've seen on the Constitution. So I would say you need to make sure you use Supreme Court, actual Supreme Court of the United States opinions, because those are controlling. Bosniak, you're saying there's a story that the plow guys heard a call around midnight that someone got hit by a plow on the same road John was found. I've not heard that before. Angie Carl's the judge ever reprimanded you? Just wondering. I've seen when an attorney gets loud. Let me think. In state courts, I don't think I have. I'm thinking this one judge that was always trying to help the prosecution. Did he? I think he might have done something, but it's not like I got. Yeah, I think I'm thinking now he did sort of scold me in front of a jury, and that was really bothering me because he's prejudicing the jury to be against me. But I think that's the one time, and so I can see a lot of judges if they have this mindset, like the courtroom has to be totally quiet, like a library, that they don't want to have anybody's feelings hurt or have any kind of disturbance of loud noise, stuff like that. If you have a judge that's wanting to have some kind of sterile environment like that, then you got a really bad judge that doesn't understand the Constitution. So there should be some passion and emotion and tenacity of confrontation. You want to have people at their line. You want to have somebody going in there smash mouth and aggressively ripping them to shreds on the stand. So if you don't have that, it's not a trial. You don't have good lawyers. So that's something that also I think that, it makes me wonder. It's like, Judge, you really want us, if I was on this case, it's almost like Judge, you really want us to try representing her. And what I would do if I was defense counsel on a case like this in Texas, if I was facing this kind of judge, I would, like on this third party culprit thing, based on the judge's ruling, because I don't think they need to go third party culprit. I think it too much puts a burden of the defense to try to come up with more credible evidence to show proof to more of a standard than just reasonable doubt. Because reasonable doubt is just a thought. Hey, I wonder if somebody else did it inside the house. But as soon as you start naming people, then you got to and then you have a third party instruction you're trying to seek. The judge is already against you doing that. She outright denied against Colin Albert. And then she's on the fence with the other two, Brian Higgins and Brian Albert, Colin's dad, Brian Albert. And so she's almost like saying, hey, this is like barely coming in right now. You sort of can present it, but it remains to be seen. So we know that they can't even mention in their opening a third party culprit. So if they can't even mention in their opening, I would just scrap it all together and put on the record and say, Your Honor, you are forcing us to go almost like an ineffective assistance mode, because our argument now has to be consistent from the opening to the closing. And you, by telling us we can't bring it out in our opening, you're effectively changing our strategy. And therefore, because we are anticipating your hostility against this theory coming out, against the Constitution, and cite these cases that you have to support it, we are now having to change our strategy. And we're actually dialing back our strategy. So instead of going to third-party culprit defense, guess what? We're just not going to go any third-party culprit defense other than by innuendo argument and reasonable doubt that other people must have acted this way, other people are in the house. So you are effectively tying our hands behind our back from argument. And, if you really want to go third-party, I would do it that way. And so, anyway, you got to know how to counteract a judge like this. That's just basically gagging you, tying your arms behind your back, putting earplugs in you, and putting duct tape all around your eyes and mouth. So that's basically, in essence, what is happening is that they don't want effective defense lawyers fighting for Karen Reed because they know they're going to lose the case if they get that. Thanks, Bugs Bunny, brother. That's nice of you. All right, jumping in here. I'm going to ask a couple more questions. We're at hour 46. Okay, Alessi's vocabulary. You're saying that it's very odd that Lally said, I hit him at her arraignment or some very early court proceeding. It's not in any documents. He is the source. So he's the one that gave Jen McCabe this idea to do that? Wow, that's interesting. Defense should dial into that. And tying the prosecution, Lally, with being the one to give her that idea. Bring that out at trial on cross-examination. Susie Lee, you're saying I think Brian Albert didn't come outside that night because he was the one who got in the fight with John and his face was probably all mashed up too. That's a reasonable doubt a juror might have if allowed to properly question these government witnesses. Kathy, thank you for your kind words. I cannot stand appellate work. I like trial work. I want to go to trial and win, so I don't have. There's not an appellate issue. I don't like trying to deal with bad rulings from the court or bad lawyering. I'd rather just take care of it on my own. So I cannot stand appellate work. Plus, it's all briefs, and you got to do an argument off a brief, and you don't get to do your own investigation because you got to stick to the record. So there's so many things about appellate work I cannot stand. My nurse Keel, thank you. I'm trying to show. You asked a question here. It's not showing up. That's weird. You gave a super chat and I'm not able to present it. And your question, oh, here it is. Auto reverse braking. The system is active when the vehicle's in reverse and traveling above 1 mile per hour, but below 7 miles per hour. Okay, so you're saying if it goes above 7 miles an hour, it's not going to work at all? So if you could explain that, please. Appreciate that. If you can. I'm just thinking about all the ring camera stuff like that they could have had. Wow, that would have really set the record straight on what happened that night. And we don't have that across the street. Alberts don't have that as a cop. He doesn't have that. Ashley Linnell, I think Brendan doesn't want ARCA because he doesn't want their testimony in the record. He doesn't want ARCA at all because they're such credible witnesses, and he's wanted to hide the ball from the jury. He wants the jury to think that they're just some insurance guys that are saying this because they don't want to pay some kind of insurance claim. Where there's Karen's, for Karen's vehicle doing the killing. So if you don't say how they got hired, it's a massive, massive deception on the jury. Massive deception. So the prosecution wants deception and the judge is rubber stamping it. So it's rigged. Just like Michelle's guitar lesson says, it's a rigged court system, okay? And then if you get somebody that's a cop that the judge picks and the judge can pick the alternates, which one's the toss, that is not a fair system. So I think somebody made the point in a comment I saw, was it today or yesterday, that if the judge makes a big point in the prosecution, there's no witnesses that ever say that John came into the house. Well, guess what? There's no witnesses that ever say that Karen there's no witness that saw Karen hit John O'Keefe, right? So not a single witness to those 2 points. So that's reasonable doubt. The judge puts so much stock in this issue of nobody will admit that John came into the house. Well, nobody saw Karen hit John O'Keefe either. In fact, all the scientific evidence shows that she did not strike John O'Keefe. Okay, so Kate. Yeah, that's a word that Brendan likes to use. There's no evidence, right? There's always no evidence the defense presents. Well, there's no evidence John O'Keefe was hit by a car. There's no credible evidence. Okay. Sam, you're asking when I'll be on for this week. I hope to catch on at night, every night. So that's my intent. Maybe if there's a key witness in this case, I'll want to do a live stream during that period. I'm not sure if I'm available to do all that. Corn Pope, you're saying I had a dream last night about ARCA witnesses that the jury already knew that they were hired by the feds. And that's because they heard and discussed the trial. Candy Angel, you're saying I couldn't give me all this evidence to the jury and I not set this woman free. This is ludicrous. John Clayton, rules for thee, not for me. Yeah, you know what? Depending who the defendant is, I don't think everybody's treated that way in Massachusetts. Karen just happened to get into some kind of thing where it's involving an officer for the death, and it happened in an officer's house. So guess what? Things will get really crazy just on those 2 factors alone. Harry's mom started harping this, but if they can prove Alan McCabe didn't pick up a stray dog and that Chloe may have been the dog in her car, would this help prove anything? Yeah, if they can prove anything they can prove about a witness not being honest is helpful. And it, again, raises questions on reasonable doubts. If you can't trust anything that these witnesses say, if there's one thing that they catch the prosecution witness lying on, where it's deleting text messages, or all this stuff about Jen and her behavior that we just covered tonight on 911 call, the they just need to be able to raise the issue. They don't have to prove that it happened. They just need to raise the issue enough where a jury's going, yeah, that does sound strange. So all these strange coincidences are not coincidences. They're actually indicators of something being amiss that defense should be able to hammer away at and say it's reasonable doubt. Yes, Clayton John, cops and Commonwealth know exactly what they're attempting, and they just don't care. All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off for tonight, folks. Thanks for your support for this case. The worst case of injustice you'll find, the way the system is rigged. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off, and I'll be on hopefully every night as the case unwinds, not during jury selection for tomorrow night, but once they go into opening statements, I will start covering it there hopefully every night. So with that, it's going to be a tough one, and I know a lot of you guys say you can't even tolerate seeing this railroad effort against Karen Reed and seeing her lawyers try to fight so faithfully for her. It's going to be really tough to stomach, but I want to see if there's any other points I can say is that just keep in mind, defense doesn't need to have a theory of the case. They don't need to connect any dots. And I hope the defense counsel really drives that home. All these reasonable doubts, just one doubt is all it takes, and you cannot convict Karen Reed. So with that, you all have a good night. Be safe. Have a great week.